I'm like thinking they're making fun of me and laughing at me because they're making faces at me, and I'm sitting down there kind of hallucinating, just thinking everything kind of went into slow motion, and then I got thinking, I says, oh, we just all died, and this is what it's like.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wild Dispatch. I'm excited to introduce Dennis McKiver today. Dennis is a guy from my local town, actually. There's a gentleman who has been a great influence on this journey of mine into wild places. I'll actually go into more detail of how Dennis and I met because I provide a wonderful waffle at the beginning of our conversation that's upcoming now. But in a nutshell, I would say that he worked for Fish and Game for a long time. He's also been very involved with hunter education. So that was how our paths first met. But it was through our time spent after that hunting and fishing together that I heard lots of other stories from his remarkable past. So without more of an ado, let's jump into our conversation with Dennis McKiver. Dennis McKiver, welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to have you here today. I would say let's go and let's talk about how we first met. So I was a fledgling, young, excited, I guess they call it adult onset hunter, curious about the world of supplying meat to my freezer through natural means. I was delighted to see that there was a local hunter education, that is, for people who maybe aren't from this country, a hunter ed course where you get your like proficiency in, you get your hunting license and all that kind of thing, right? So I saw that there was one nearby to where I live, which amazed me because nothing normally happens in Fort Bragg. And yeah, so I decided to go, and it was there that I met you. You were actually the instructor for the 2-day course. So yeah, although I didn't even have a bow at the time, I just went because I was curious about the whole thing. And you very kindly offered to... lost my paper. You very kindly offered to let me come over to your house and have a try with your bow and kind of ask you loads of probably irritating questions about very newbie things. And yeah, that kind of got me started. And you gave me a bunch of tips and places to try out, like go and look for turkeys and deer, and that kept me occupied for many years.
And you did pretty good.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I needed to know the right place to look in the first place, and that was where you really helped. And we also went fishing a bunch as well. You've taken me out, and we've caught all kinds of things. I remember some very, to me, enormous tuna, but apparently they're just tiddlers, like 30-pounders or something like that, so albacore. And I've heard along those adventures lots of stories from you from various times in your life, and so that's why you're here now. I'd love to hear more, and I'd love to kind of string those together and maybe hear some of those stories again, but also just hear, where it all began. Like, you've got such a connection with the outdoors, and you've clearly spent a lot of time outside in your life, and so I'd love to just hear where it all began. Did you were you on the coast or were you inland? Or
No, I started out inland. I was born in Sacramento, and my folks had a small little farm, 10 acres in Florin, which is a little community just south of Sacramento. And my aunt and uncle lived up in Sutter Creek, which was up in the hills above Sacramento, up Highway 88, Highway 49. And my uncle was big into hunting.
Okay.
So he would take my dad hunting for deer. My dad wasn't all that big of a hunter, but he would go deer hunting.
Okay.
And so on opening deer hunting, and then when I became 5 years old, they started taking me along on their deer hunts. Okay.
5 years old. Nice.
Yeah.
So you're just like a happy spectator.
Yeah. So I mean, I started out. They bought me as a kid. Back then when guns weren't such a issue.
Yes.
Every kid had one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just carry
Especially if you grew up in the country, I had a BB gun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I practiced shooting my BB gun,
Yeah.
And it was mainly a practice of carrying something with me while I was out there. I wasn't deer hunting. I was just carrying this BB gun.
Yeah.
But they would instill safe gun handling.
Well, that's good.
With me for that. And I mean, they did the same thing when, before I was 5 years old, I had plastic toy guns that I was given, and I would be taught, you know, you don't point those at your siblings, and you know.
Surely when you're a kid, that's all the fun.
That's all the fun, you know. You're out there, you know, playing cowboys, and you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so that's how it started. So I went from there, and then eventually my father took a job in Redding, California.
Okay.
So we moved up to Redding, and then Redding was kind of a even more rural community at the time, and a lot of recreation around there, a lot of fishing, a lot of hunting. So my friends that I was attracted to in school, we moved up there when I was in 9th grade. So my friends I was attracted to in school were all hunters and fishermen.
Okay.
You know, so when the other kids were out partying, we just were going to bed early because we had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go hunting or fishing on Saturday. You know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I really got into bird hunting and archery. That's why.
Okay, so you're
back
into
then, I
archery
mean,
back
they
then.
had. Yeah, I mean, all the schools had archery in the schools. There's a national archery in the schools program
Okay.
in the U.S. A lot of schools like Fort Bragg, you know, think that, archery, you know, bows and arrows are bad, so they stopped the archery in the schools
did they?
program, unfortunately. And but they had it when I went to school. So that's when I first started into archery, was in high school. And then, of course, my high school buddies and I says, well, let's go hunting.
Yeah, if I can hit that target.
I can hit that target, we can go hunting.
Yeah.
And, you know, back then we're shooting a recurve bow and with cedar arrows. You know,
Really?
yeah, cedar wooden arrows. They didn't, I mean, later on they came along with aluminum arrows, but mostly they were like, I think they had some fiberglass arrows, but mostly it was aluminum arrows that came along later. But
Much heavier, though.
yeah, when we started out, it was cedar arrows.
Okay, which are
Which,
really,
you know,
really
you
heavy.
shoot them and they break usually. You know?
Really?
And they were bare archery heads, so they had a main blade and then a cross insert razor blade you put them in them. So it was a 4-bladed thing.
Oh, wow.
But you
Already
had
a
to
4-blade.
sharpen on a sharpening stone the regular blade,
Yes.
and then you could put in new razor blades in there. So those were the kind of the there was different types of archery arrowheads at the time, but that was kind of the preferred one that everybody liked the most. Was
Yeah.
Because, I mean, everybody watched Fred Bear on TV. He was a famous archer, you know. You watch on TV, watch him shooting grizzly bears and stuff, you know, with his bow.
Yeah.
Way back in the 50s and 60s. You know.
And that's what he used, right?
Yeah, and that was his brand, so that's what he used. You know.
I mean, sounds pretty effective. Like, also,
Yeah.
I'm guessing, like, that kind of simple blade, you can resharpen that and reuse it.
You could resharpen
quite
and
a
use
few
it, but I
times.
mean, there was times when, you know, you'd shoot up a dozen arrows without hitting any. Yeah, like I said, you know, it was like having a deer stand there at 40 yards is different than having a target stand there 40 yards.
Exactly. It's very different. I
Yeah.
learned that very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was kind of, you were like running around with your buddies.
With my buddies,
hunting with
you
a
know.
bow, like kind of, is that where you kind of really learned all that stuff? Did you have any mentors at the time who were?
No, just my buddy. You know, I didn't have any. There was no adults really archery hunting at the time. You know, the mentors were Fred Bear on TV.
Yeah.
And then our friends.
Yeah.
You know, kind of teaching each other. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and
And,
that's cool, right? Like, you learn from
There was
mistakes.
no compound bows out there at the time.
Yep.
You know.
That was,
I
yeah.
ended up buying a compound bow, one of the very first ones that came out, and never could get as accurate with that as we could with a recurve, because we're finger shooting. You know, that's why I discovered later on the compound bows were sensitive, so that's
the
when they came out
releases.
with the releases.
Funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I actually tried. Someone gave me the advice the other day from a guy in South Africa, told me, you should at least practice with your compound with fingers, because
Yeah.
the chances are at some point you're going to be next to a giant kudu or an enormous bull,
Yeah.
and you're going to reach for your release and it's not going to be there.
Not gonna-
And it's like 20 yards away. You should know, okay, if I
Yeah.
draw back and shoot this thing with my fingers, what's going to happen? And I had a go with it the other day, 2 days ago, and I drew back and I was at 20 yards. I thought, how hard can it be? And I probably shot a tree way over the target.
Oh, you're finger releasing your compound bow?
Yeah.
So my advice on a compound bow is you wear your release like a wristwatch.
Yes.
It's just there all the time.
Yeah, except I've got one of those fancy ones that you hold with your fingers.
Yeah, well, you might want to get a simpler one that you could.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's those people.
You know,
on the
you can wear
internet.
around your wrist and then tuck it in your jacket, so it's just there.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Because
true.
it's really difficult to get accurate with finger shooting a compound bow.
I noticed. I had
Yeah.
maybe 5 or 6 shots, but I got it just about figured out. I have to aim about 2.5 feet below where I think I'm going to hit at 20 yards. Then it's all good, and maybe a bit left. So anyway, sorry, I take us on a tangent. So yeah, you were hunting with your buddies at that point. At what point then, you know, I guess you kind of growing up and start looking at like a career. Was
Well,
at that
when-
point you were kind of in love with the outdoors? Did you always know? that
No,
you
I
wanted
was
to-
always in love with the outdoors. I was always the outdoor kid. You know, it's like
Yeah.
even when I was 5 years old, you know, when my siblings wanted to play in the house, I wanted to go out and play outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was out catching snakes, and you know, one of the things I remember doing is when my parents thought I was sleeping, I was sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night to go frog gigging. My mother would wake up in the morning and there'd be a plate of frog legs in the refrigerator, and she'd like, "Were you out frog gigging last night?" You know.
No, it was magic.
Yeah.
It's a magical phrase.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
She appreciated the food, but didn't think I should be out by myself at 7, 8 years old, gigging
Oh,
frogs.
you were gigging frogs at 7 or 8 years
Yeah,
old.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's funny. So, yeah. So then, did you always like have an idea or a dream of what kind of job you wanted to go into?
Yeah, so when my parents or my uncle and father first started taking me hunting at 5 years old,
Yeah.
the first thing I did was I met the game warden,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
and I met forest rangers. So I was like, I wanted to be a game warden or a forest ranger,
It makes sense.
you know. So since I was 5 years old, that's what I wanted to do, and that was my, you know, plans. So I planned to do. That's what I planned for a career from the time I was little,
Yeah.
you know.
So how did that? I guess if you know a lot of people who are game wardens and in that world, was it pretty easy then to be like, hey, can I, you know, tag along with you?
No, because
or-
I didn't know anybody.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't. I just met the game warden who came and checked us one time, and I said, "Oh, that's kind of a cool job,"
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
as a little 5-year-old kid. And then I didn't really know any game wardens after that. Just once in a while, we'd run into him when he came to check us while we were hunting. And you know, so even when I was a teenager hunting with my buddies, we didn't run into game wardens too often, you know, because they were few and far between, and you know, the country was big, and we weren't doing anything illegal, so they weren't targeting us.
It was just fleeting moments.
Just fleeting moments, you know.
Okay.
And, you know, you'd maybe see one when you went into the Fish and Game office to get your license or something, you know.
So did you first go into that? Was that like a moment that you decided, okay, I'm going to try and get a job as a, you know?
No,
in
I'd planned
field,
that
or-
for a long time. See, so when I got done with high school, you know, you figure out, well, what do I need? At the time, game wardens needed 2 years of college in order to apply to be a game warden.
Okay.
Okay, so right about the time I was graduating from high school at 18, the Vietnam War was going on,
Okay.
and I had a draft number.
Oh,
and
you
my
got drafted.
and my brother, well, I didn't get drafted, but my brother, who was 2 years ahead of me, he ended up with draft number 1, which means he was going to get drafted. So the smart people, instead of getting drafted, enlist, because when you enlist, you get to pick the job you want. When you get drafted, they tell you what you're going to be, and it's usually, you know, cannon fodder,
Yeah,
an
yeah.
infantryman in the Marines or the Army.
Okay.
Okay, so my brother enlisted in the Air Force, and I remember in 8th grade, we were supposed to, one of the subjects we studied at homeroom was careers, and we all had to do a report on various careers that we might be interested in, and I actually did one on the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
So at the time, I was deviating away from, well, if I got to go to college anyway, maybe I should go in the Air Force first. So I was thinking of trying to get an appointment to the Air Force Academy. Of course, I knew I had to get good grades and everything for that. But that was the report I did.
Okay.
And then my brother ended up going into the Air Force, and then
Because of the draft.
because of the draft, so he wouldn't get drafted. And 2 years later, I had a draft number, but mine was real high, and it was at the end of the war, and it was looking like I probably would have avoided getting drafted just by number, but I didn't want to take that chance.
Yeah.
But also, it was kind of like I wanted to get away from home at 18 anyway,
Yes.
you know, and
And what did your brother, like, I imagine you would have spoken to him a bit.
Yeah, so I
he told you about
talked to him, and I says, okay, here's a job I signed up for. So, you know, they always tell you, the recruiters always tell you, says, well, you take the test, and then they tell you what jobs you're qualified for.
Yes.
Well, I scored high enough, I qualified for anything.
Wow,
So they always
that's nice.
encourage you, so, well, take the school that's the longest, it's the toughest, and for the smartest kids, you know, take that. They try to get you into that. Well, basically, they're trying to get you into one that they have a hard time filling for
Okay.
somebody else. So
Yeah.
the class I chose was Precision Measurement Instrument Specialist, because it was in the electronics field, and it was, and I was kind of interested in electronics. I'd been in Boy Scouts and got my electronics merit badge in Boy Scouts, so I kind of had a class in that. So I was kind of a little bit interested in electrical stuff.
Yeah.
So I took this in electronics as Precision Measurement Instrument Specialist, and I talked to my brother, and he says, no, you're not going to like that. He says, that's inside a climate-controlled room where you got to, like, put on a special gown and suit to go in and everything, because everything's got to be perfectly clean and whatnot. Because he went into electronics. That was his thing.
Okay.
He was a computer repair specialist. And he knew, he says, you're going to hate that job, you know. He says, so don't do it. Don't do it. So I went back and told the recruiter that I changed my mind. Because at the time you could go in with a guaranteed job.
Okay.
You go in and say, this is what I want. And as long as you made it through training and didn't get set back or anything, then
you can get it.
you'd get that job. Well, I went back and told the recruiter I didn't want that job. Of course, they have quotas they're supposed to fill, so he wasn't too happy because he lost that quota.
Yeah.
And I says, well, I don't know what I want to do. So I says, just let me go in under the general field.
Okay.
General field means once you get in, whatever job's available you can apply for. He says, well, you don't know. Well, my brother had been in, and he told me, he says, well, there's a job that you would probably like. He says, it's called pararescue. And so I went back and told the recruiter, I says, I want to go into pararescue. He says, well, you can't, because they only recruit out of, once you're in the basic training in the Air Force, then they recruit out of basic training, and you can't just go in and get a guaranteed job in pararescue. I said, well, what field is it in? I said, well, pararescue is listed under the general field.
Yes.
And so I says, well, that's what I want to do. And so I just went in under the general field, and then said, oh, I'm going to go into pararescue.
And so there was, like, you had to fit some criteria in, like, training. You had to show
Yeah, so
that you were
once you
talented enough.
Yeah, once you get in there, they ask if you want to go to a special briefing for some special forces jobs. And the two special forces, the jobs that they had at the time, were combat control and pararescue. And they also had survival specialists, but that wasn't open at the time when I went through.
Okay.
They only offered me combat control or pararescue. So you go to this briefing, and there's like 200 people, the other guys there. So this is out of maybe 2,000 that were there at the basic training. Maybe 200 guys raised their hands and said, I'll go to that briefing to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Did it have a reputation, that job?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing the recruiter says, he says, you don't want to go into there. He says, they have a life expectancy in Vietnam about 15 minutes. You know? And so.
What did that make you think?
I really didn't. I said, that's okay, kind of thing.
It won't be me.
Yeah. So I knew he was exaggerating, for one, you know.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so we go to this briefing, and then here's a guy in his dress blues. I went to the pararescue briefing, and there's a guy in his dress blues, and he's wearing a maroon beret. And the maroon beret in pararescue was, the pararescue men were the only ones in the military at the time in the Air Force wearing berets. The only ones authorized to wear the berets.
Okay.
And it was given to them because so many of them had died during Vietnam. It was to simulate the blood lost, you know, the maroon
Yeah.
blood-colored beret,
Wow.
you know.
Yeah.
So it kind of set us above everybody else because we're the only ones who were allowed to wear the beret. Now there's a whole bunch of people in the Air Force and every other service wearing berets, but at the time us and the Green Berets were the only ones wearing berets. And so went into this briefing, and here's a sergeant there who has a massive scar across his face and doesn't talk real clearly because he was under a helicopter when it got shot down and a piece of rotor blade took off half his face.
Wow.
And they pieced him back together, and down at Lackland Air Force Base, the neighboring hospital down there was the major hospital for reconstructive surgery, so he was spending the rest of that part of his career down there getting reconstructed.
Bolted back together.
But I mean, the guy had, awards and ribbons and had done 3 tours in Vietnam kind of thing, and
beforehand.
So he was there. He was the recruiter. Okay, this is what you have to look forward to.
Wow, I can imagine. I don't know. To my naive self, having someone who's like
yeah,
the window.
So that weeded out a few people out of that group. But
yeah,
the only thing I remember out of that is somebody says, he was telling how tough. He says, hardly anybody in this room will make it through training even if you all tried.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, well, Sergeant, says, how out of this room, this example, how many do you think would make it out of this room? He looks around at 200 people there and he goes, 1. He says, maybe 2. Well, it turned out I took that to note.
Yeah.
And 2 of us out of that room made it through.
Really?
Yeah.
And how hard, how long was the process, like it's the training and the selection process?
The selection process, so what they have you do after you go to that briefing, they say, okay, let's, anybody who wants to, still after the briefing wants to come take the physical fitness test,
yeah,
then you can.
Okay.
And this is what you're going to have to pass the physical fitness. And then they gave you a few weeks to prep. So you can work out extra for the physical fitness test.
Yeah, yeah.
And do extra push-ups and pull-ups and whatever. And they told you what you needed, and so I signed up with, there was probably maybe out of that group there, maybe 25, maybe 30 that said, I'll take the test.
Okay.
And so we went to take the test, and here's something that unusual that happened. It's probably the only reason I passed the test.
Okay.
So one of the tests you had to take was a swim test.
Yeah,
so
as part of the fitness test.
As part of the fitness test. And I think that was the first thing, because most people drop out of the fitness. They have to do the swim, and if you pass the swim, then you do the other exercise.
Which makes sense. It's like the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to go take, I think they did the test like on a Saturday, because we were doing our other training. And so we had to kind of do this on our own time to go to special training. We couldn't get out of what else we were doing. And and of course everybody gave us a hard time, and those of us who were trying to go try out for pararescue, we were doing extra exercises when everybody else was doing physical fitness. We'd do another extra, and we'd do stuff on our own time, and everybody was teasing us and giving a hard time, telling us you never make it anyway.
What's the point?
Why you waste your point? So anyway, so when I went to take the test, this is in San Antonio, Texas. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever been to San Antonio, Texas, but it's in southern Texas, down by the Gulf.
Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds hot.
It's warm down there.
Okay.
Yeah. This was in wintertime. It was in December.
Okay.
So I was there December, January. I think it was, December. End of December. It was after Christmas, right after Christmas. Anyway, so it's wintertime in San Antonio, but it's down southern Texas. It never snows in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
The night before I went to take my swim test, it snowed 12 inches overnight.
12 inches?
12 inches. There were 12 inches of snow on the ground in the morning.
Oh.
And taking a swim test in an unheated pool.
That's basically at freezing.
Yeah, and it was like, I wasn't that great of a swimmer. I swam on a swim team in 8th grade. It was the only time, but I was not that great of a you know, of a swimmer.
Yeah.
And I knew swimming was required a lot, but I think the water being that cold, and the other thing is I wrestled in high school.
Okay.
So I wrestled like 127, and when I graduated as a senior, I was wrestling 138. And
That's pounds.
pounds.
How much you
Yeah,
weigh?
not kilograms, pounds.
Yeah.
And then I would think I was 145 pounds when I went into the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just
Pretty light.
5'11", 145.
Yeah, that's light.
Skinny kid.
Yeah.
You know, I had no body fat on me.
Yeah.
You know, so in order to stay warm, I mean, people used to call me the shrew because I was eating all the time. And in order to stay warm, I had to swim fast. Otherwise, I wasn't going to make it. So I don't know, it's maybe God's way of like making me pass this test was dropping 12 inches of snow in San Antonio when it never snows in San Antonio.
You're either going to get through or you're going to
Or
die.
you're going to freeze to death.
Yeah.
And there was other people that quit because they got too cold, got hypothermic and quit. I mean, big guys that, you know, had some body fat.
Wow.
And I made it through, you know, and got warmed up, and then did the other exercises were pretty easy for me because having been a wrestler and whatnot, it was just a swim test that was the hardest. And so I got through all that, and then they says, okay, after basic training, you're going to show up to pararescue training. The pararescue training is on the same base.
Okay.
So,
In Texas.
Yeah. So you go from one basic training to pararescue basic training. And
that's harder?
that's harder. Oh yeah, much harder.
Okay.
I mean, the Air Force basic training was 8 weeks long, and it was a joke compared to the 8 weeks of pararescue training. Okay, and it turned out to be several months because the way pararescue was set up at the time is, I think there was only, like two of us that
Yeah.
made it even through the start. There might have been 4 of us that made it into start the training, and then a couple dropped out of there.
Yeah.
But we couldn't. You had to be there for 4 weeks at the pararescue training. Okay.
Okay.
But you couldn't move on to the next school because the next school wouldn't take you until you could at least have 6 people in your class. So we got up to like 4 people in the class.
Yeah.
You know, there was 2 of us here, and there was another kid, that was I kind of took under my wing because he came in behind me, but he had the same experience as me. He didn't have to swim in 12 inches of snow, but he wasn't a very good swimmer. He couldn't hardly swim a lick, but he dog paddled around there and made it through the thing. And then I had to teach him how to swim.
Okay.
So, so every day during this 4 weeks was just Olympic caliber physical fitness training. That's all we did is work out.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't allowed to walk anywhere, you had to run. You know, whenever you went in and out of the building, you had to do 10 pull-ups.
Really?
Yeah, and if you couldn't do a pull-up, you had to do 100 push-ups.
Oh, you better
For
finish
every
that
pull-up you didn't do.
Really?
And everybody had to do everything as a team. So if your buddy didn't do a pull-up, everybody had to do 100 push-ups. Okay.
Oh.
So it was just a way of getting you working out, you know. And then you swimming every day, more and more swimming, and what was funny though, this is a funny story, is one of the swims we had to do was towel swims.
Towel swim.
Yeah, so you had to swim across the pool with a bath towel in each hand.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So what does that even look like?
Well, it's like
Yeah.
10 pounds of water weight. You got to like bring it up out of the water and swim with it.
Oh, like front crawl kind of style.
Yeah,
swimming.
you had to crawl swim.
Wow.
You couldn't just drag these things while you're, you know,
Yeah.
side stroking or something. You had to. Well, one of the things I did in high school or when I was a kid, I fished a lot as well as hunted.
Yeah.
And I really got into fly fishing, tying my own flies and fly fishing because I lived up in Redding where that's all everybody does up there, fly fish.
Yeah.
So I figured out that if I grabbed this bath towel, and I said I'm just a skinny little kid, I grabbed this bath towel by the very end, and it's like 4 feet behind me with the bath towel. I could stick my hand up in the air like this, and I could flick the bath towel like a fly rod, and the bath towel would whip out and yank me forward 3 feet. And I could get this rhythm down. And I was pretty ambidextrous because all the sports I've ever done were, I didn't play baseball and football and stuff. I did wrestling and mountain climbing and stuff.
So there's like a symmetry to that.
Yeah,
sports.
so I was pretty ambidextrous. So
Yeah.
I could do one hand. So I went from being, so if we had 8 guys swimming in the pool, I'd be somewhere in the middle as far as the fastest. And I went from being the middle swimmer to not just being the front swimmer, but smoking everybody else when we did towel swims. And when the instructor said, "What kind of swim shall we do today?" I'd go towel swims, and everybody would beat on me because nobody else wanted to do towel swims. I tried to teach the technique to everybody else, but because they didn't have this fly fishing thing down, they just couldn't get it.
I love it.
But the towel swims were easy for me, but they were rough for everybody else. But they have you do things like, okay, we're going to swim across, do laps carrying a metal folding chair,
Yeah.
or a baselite brick, or something where it's so heavy you have to run, hold your breath and run on the bottom to come and get here and then run back,
But I guess in a way, it's got to reflect well on you, because it's like, here's a difficult situation that's kind of a weird thing, and then it's like, if you show that you can figure out like a way to optimize that situation and actually, reduce how much of an impact it is, then that's got to be super handy if you're in the field.
Exactly.
Right, like, oh, the shit's hit the fan, let's come up with a quick solution.
Yeah, exactly. So we were there with 4 people trying to get 2 more, and at the end of 4 weeks, the 5th week or the 4th week is the equivalent of the Navy SEALs, what they call Hell Week.
Okay.
The Navies, they take a whole lot of people and they kind of do their Hell Week the first week, and it gets rid of everybody. But the Air Force does the same thing, but they kind of give you, they know where you're at, and they want to build you up to this point, and then they give you the Hell Week. And then once you pass that, then it's time to go on to your next training.
Yes.
You're going to have the same training for a whole year, but this is just your initial training.
Is one thing.
They build you up, and then well, what was happening is there's the 4 of us, and we've already been there for like 6-8 weeks now, and we're like wanting to get out of there. We want to move on to our next training. So every time we miss our 4-week thing, we got to wait another 4 weeks. So I think we end up being there like 12 weeks, maybe 14 weeks. Anyway, what was happening is we'd get these new guys come right out of basic training, and they'd come in there, and there'd be 4 of us, and we want to get out of there and be like, let's just give them the Hell Week the first week.
Yeah.
And the instructors, because we were the ones that would test these guys.
Yeah.
And then we'd tell the instructors whether or not they passed and ready to go on with our class. And we go, no, those guys didn't make it. And they were wondering why nobody was making it. And it's because we were giving them the Hell Week the first week.
Straight away.
Yeah. Well, the Navy was doing that. Why can't we do it? So we gave it straight away. So finally we got 2 guys that came in there, were in good shape, and they passed. So we were able to move on with our...
And you got some good guys.
Yeah, we got some good guys. So the 6 of us moved on to our next training. The next training was up in March Air Force Base in... it was Wichita Falls, which is not Wichita, Kansas, but Wichita Falls across the border is in the panhandle of Texas.
Okay.
So you're up in Tornado Alley.
Yeah.
So I remember the tornado silence going off and us going to shelter at times during class, Yeah, so, because it was like, it started out in December, and I think we're in March already. Okay, so it's at March Air Force Base, and it's March, and there's tornadoes. And anyway, that was medical training. So we had medical training. We had like 4 weeks of medical training there. And then while down at Lackland study, we had some classroom stuff we did other than, most of it's physical fitness, but they said, well, since you guys are being here so long, we're going to prep you for your other class. So we were studying dive physics so we can go to scuba school.
Oh, cool.
And then we were studying medical terminology and stuff like that. So we had that all down when we went to medical training.
Yeah. So you kind of had a head start.
We kind of had a head start there. That was the benefit of staying there longer. The instructors thought, well, we'll get these guys a little head start. So we get up to medical training, and you learn basic. It was the same class that they give all the basic combat medics and stuff. So we did that for 4 weeks, but half the day was medical training and half the day was physical fitness training. So we swam farther, ran farther, do more push-ups, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then from there, we went, all the jumpers go to Army Jump School, which is Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay, and is that where you learn to parachute?
That's where you learn to parachute.
Okay.
You basically learn to fall out of an airplane. Yeah. They at Fort Benning is 3 weeks long. They spend one whole week, you spend jumping off a platform about the size of this picnic table onto the ground and learning how to roll properly without getting hurt.
Without like breaking something.
Without breaking something. So the first week you're doing that. You're jumping off the table just a whole week.
Yeah.
I mean, you get bored just jumping, rolling, jump, go to the line, jumping, rolling. So you just learn how to static line parachute. They give you like 3 static line jumps out of C-130s and C-141s, which is the jets.
Okay.
The cargo jets. So.
And a static link.
Static line is where you jump out and there's a line attached to the plane, and it pulls your parachute out for you. All you have to do is jump.
Simple.
If you don't jump, somebody kicks you out the door.
Really?
Somebody's got a big boot. Yeah, really.
Did that ever happen to your team?
Oh, there's people in the class that got pushed out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the way they do it, you're jumping out of both sides of the jump doors on the airplane.
And that's at the back.
And you're jumping like this.
Oh, that's on the sides of the plane.
On the side of the plane. And if you go off at the same time, you could tangle up. So when somebody hesitates, it messes up that rhythm. And then you got a bunch of people getting parachutes tangled, and you can kill somebody.
That's dangerous.
So they got somebody with a big boot. If you hesitate for a half a second, you're getting booted out the door.
Brilliant.
Anyway, so from there we went to, at the time, the Navy had a scuba school down in Key West, Florida. So they had 2 schools, was Key West and San Diego. Mm-hmm. And for scuba divers, they had a hard hat school up in Washington, D.C., up in the Potomac River, but the scuba school was Key West, Florida. So I got to go to the Key West one. Some guys went to San Diego, but Key West was better because the water was warmer. It was nice. It was springtime. It was great. I mean, when I wasn't in scuba training, I was out skin diving on my own.
Okay.
I got into that so much.
Just loved it. Yeah.
I just loved it so much, kind of like you in archery. It was like, I just, spent 8 hours in training in the water, and then I'd go jump in the water some more.
Just obsessed.
Yeah, I was obsessed with it. So, and I got to go fishing while I was down there. So.
Great.
So anyway, 4 weeks down there, and then after scuba training, then it was like we went to, at the time it was Hill Air Force Base. Now they moved the school down to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, but I was at Hill Air Force Base, was the pararescue training.
Okay.
So what pararescue training does is they take all the stuff that you learned, the medical, the scuba, the parachuting and everything, and combine it all together and say, okay, now you're going to learn, you're going to become not just a basic medic, you're going to become a paramedic, and so you're getting more advanced medical procedures and everything. You learn that in class, and then we're going to take this jumping and scuba diving, and we're going to throw you out of an airplane with scuba tanks and wetsuit on while you're carrying your medical kit with you. And then we learned, so we were trained to, we were supposed to be able to rescue anybody anywhere in the world. Okay, so we had to train
for everything.
So we got extensive mountain climbing experience and training, for rock climbing and just mountaineering in general. So we did that, and it was just kind of a fun time just putting all this stuff together.
Yeah.
And then if you made it, there was a number of people that didn't make it even after they went through everything else, they just couldn't get the whole jumping out of the airplane with scuba gear on kind of thing. Couldn't put it together, and because you have to be careful, because if you jump out of the airplane wrong and you end up upside down and flipping through your risers, you got all this gear on you. You end up hanging up upside down.
Okay.
I remember there's one kid and he couldn't jump out of the airplane right, and every time he ended up upside down in his parachute, and he was going to get killed if he kept doing that. So they said, "You're out of here. You know, you're too dangerous. We can't."
Oh.
So we got to put it all together, and then if you made it through that training, then you graduated, and they gave you a assignment of where you were going to go from there. So I tried, and based on where you graduated from, they would give you, if you were top in your class, you got first choice, and second choice, third choice. So me and my best friend and the buddy, we were kind of battling over that, and I think I beat him by 1 point on first choice. And I was trying to go to Alaska for my, I wanted to be stationed in Alaska.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to Southeast Asia, I wanted to go to Alaska. So Alaska was on the thing, I put in for Alaska. Well, just before I left to go to Alaska, they said, "Oh, that assignment's been canceled. You're going to Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington now."
Oh.
So I went there instead.
Were you disappointed?
Yes, but after I got up there, it turned out to be a good deal. It was just as cold as Alaska. I don't know if you've ever been to Spokane, Washington in the wintertime, but
No, I don't think I have.
it gets to 10 below zero there. So.
Okay.
At least it did with the winter I was there.
Yeah.
And that's why I started. We were at Hill Air Force Base, Utah. So while I was there, I started snow skiing. I had done some snow skiing before as a kid.
Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, this was back when everybody, wooden skis. And you do snow skiing or snowboarding or anything?
I've done a very little bit.
Okay, so anyway, it was wooden skis.
Yeah.
And if now, now the thing is short, wide skis.
Yeah.
At the time, it was like long, narrow skis, and they measured you for skis by reaching your hand up over your head, and the ski tip was supposed to touch your wrist. So a skinny kid with long arms, they put me on way too long of skis.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually tore up my knees because the bindings back then didn't release like they do now.
So you just stuck to them.
Yeah, so I fell and tore up my knees. I mean, they wanted to take me into operation and take out the cartilage in my knees, because I was damaged and whatnot. And now they don't do that. Now they know they can repair it.
Yeah.
But they, at the time, that's why all these knee replacements are going on now, because at the time, people my age, they went in, "Oh, you got a bad knee? We'll take the cartilage out."
And that's not a good thing.
That's not, no, because then you got bone on bone.
Yeah, and what's that going to do?
So I refused to let them to do that.
Okay, good.
And even though I had bad knees, I didn't tell the Air Force that, and they didn't have access to my personal medical record. So if I had told the Air Force that, I would never gone into pararescue.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, I never had any problem with my knees. To this day, the doctors say, "Your knees are perfect. Your knees are good," even with all the parachuting and mountain climbing. My hips are all worn out. I've had 2 hip replacements, but my knees are fine, luckily.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I learned to ski, and I learned to ski at Spokane. I skied even more.
Yeah.
When you're in the Air Force, in the military, you can get military discount tickets to the military recreation. And it was like, I think tickets at the time were $15.
Is that to ski?
To ski.
Okay, like
and that was expensive at the time. So you had to pay and they had the ski resort up there had night skiing and day skiing, and it was $15 per day. And then if you wanted to ski at night, after 3 o'clock, you could up to 3 to 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
You could buy another $15 with it, so you could ski. So it cost you $30 to do everything. Well, with the Air Force, for $7, you could ski the whole time from morning to night. And me and my buddies would go up there. We'd be the first one on the ski lift at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'd be the last ones off. I think they closed at 10 at night or something. We'd be the last ones off at night. And we just skied until we were exhausted. So one time I got pretty good at skiing. Me and my buddy were skiing down the double diamond run right under the chairlift, and we had just made it down the steep part, and we were coming down on the flat before you go down again, and and I kind of celebrating not falling down on the steep part,
Yeah.
and I fell down on the flats. And I wasn't going very fast, and not going very fast, I ended up, the bindings didn't release, and I broke my leg.
Ugh.
So
It's funny how that works, right?
yeah,
Sometimes a slow.
thing, because your bindings are set for you skiing as hard in a certain way. I'm skiing moguls real hard on a steep run. Your bindings are cranked all the way down, because in case you fall while you're going fast, you don't want to. Otherwise, you'll blow out of your bindings.
And then that's
while you're,
even worse.
Then you're going to fall because your ski just came off while you're skiing. I've had that happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I broke my right leg and boot top fracture of the fibia. So it wasn't the tibia in the front; it was just a bone in the back.
Okay.
And I, being a macho young guy at the time, I told my buddy, yeah, I'm okay. I'll be right behind you. And he skied on down, and I went to get up, and then I couldn't stand on that leg. And even the ski patrol guy came over in the chairlift. It was even too steep for the ski patrol guys to ski.
Oh.
They weren't skiing this mogul run either. So he asked me if I was okay, and I said, yeah, I'm okay. And then I went to get up, and I couldn't stand on it. I couldn't ski on it, so I ended up skiing, carrying my ski and skiing down the hill on one ski.
One-legged skiing.
One-legged skiing down the hill. And then I went into there, and the funny part is I went to the hospital. My buddies took me in to the hospital the next day and morning. I went in there, and I walked into the emergency room, and I'm a paramedic at the time. I knew how to diagnose a broken leg. I knew it was broken.
Yeah.
And so I went in there, and I told them I broke my leg, and the guys, yeah, right. You wouldn't be walking in here if you broke your leg. Now, take this, walk down the hall, X-ray, get an X-ray. I walk down the hall to X-ray, get the X-ray, come back. I pull the X-ray out, put it up on the window. Oh, yep, it's broken. Put it back in, go back in, and I hand it back to the med tech in there that had me go walk down the hall, and he pulls it out, and he looks at it, and he just like freaks out because it's broken, and he made me walk down the hall. He was just saw his career flashing before his eyes. oh, you got to sit down,
Hey, please have a seat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now.
Anyway, the doctor at the time, you had to be cast from the tip of your toes. The protocol was casting the joint above and the joint below the fracture.
Wow.
So you had a full leg cast for a tibia or fibia fracture, and it was like, Doc, please don't do that to me. Give me a walking cast. I says I walked in here on it. I skied off the hill on it. It's not that bad. It's just cracked. Give me a walking cast. He says okay. I talked him into it. He just gave me a walking cast. Had me come back a week later to see how it was doing and get the cast changed, because then we didn't have fiberglass casts. They were like
Plaster.
Yeah, plaster casts.
Yeah.
And they get wet and start falling apart. So they came in, they want to check it, and then they didn't have an X-ray machine that could X-ray through the cast. So
Okay.
they take them and then they take an X-ray. Well, we did that, and it was like, I can't even see where it's broken. He says, you're completely healed. He says, I'm not even going to put a cast back on you. He says, you're good.
Really?
Yeah.
In 1 week.
In 1 week. Well, see, that's the protocol now. You break your leg, they get you up walking on it right away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
I
actually...
had 2 hip replacements, and that's the same as a broken leg. And they get you walking an hour after your surgery. They walk you around the hospital, and then once you can walk around on your own, they send you home the same day. It's like an outpatient procedure now. And they find that your bones heal faster if you start working them. I mean, even when you have a really serious fracture, they put a machine on your leg if you're laying there in bed that's moving your leg so your knee doesn't stiffen up and everything.
It makes complete sense. I actually just interviewed a physical therapist.
Yeah.
A guy called Dr. Preston Ward, and he said that it's like within a day you can see
it start to heal.
Like the atrophy starting to happen, or it's like maybe day 1 is okay, but by day 2 muscles and everything are already starting to degenerate.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So I claim to be one of the first to convince the doctors to change their
The pioneer.
The pioneer on not casting the joint above and below, because I knew it would take me forever to get back up. So actually 3 weeks after I broke my leg, I was skiing on it again.
Great. There you go. So was there any more parts to the training? after that? You said you got through skiing, you broke your leg, carried on miraculously.
Carry on. That was my first assignment at Fairchild. That was when the training was over.
Oh,
so,
yes, sorry, okay.
So when I got out of training there, the other training we're pararescue men are crew members on airplanes.
Okay.
So whatever airplanes are stationed where you're going to go, you got to get training on that airplane. So it turned out I was going to a unit that were Huey helicopters, the H-1 helicopters.
Yes.
So the Huey training school was right there at Hill Air Force Base. So I got to stay there another 4 weeks while I got to go to Huey training.
Okay.
And then I went to Spokane and started there. And one of our main things we did on the Hueys there, Spokane is where the Air Force Survival School is. So I missed that when we were going through the pararescue training. There was 3 weeks at the Survival School in Spokane. I missed that one.
And did they have like hectic training where they put you in really difficult situations?
Well, yeah. I mean, they put you in a prisoner of war camp situation where, and I just remember, they put you in a box that you can't move in, and it's really dark, and they try to mess with your mind because you don't know what time it is or anything. So what they do is they, you can hear voices outside. So you hear somebody says, I want you to check on these guys every hour and wake them up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, 10 minutes will go by and you'll check on it like an hour has passed.
Yeah.
And then 5 minutes will go by and you'll check on you again. And then a minute will go by and you'll check on you again. And then check on you every minute. And then people come out of there and would try to file complaints. Said the guys, they left me in there for like 20 hours. And really, you're only in there for like 30 minutes.
That's so strange.
Yeah, so it's like because your mind messes with you and you have any senses going on except what you hear.
That's so wild.
Yeah, and my best buddy, he was kind of funny because he was smaller than I was, and they put you in like head first in this box. It's kind of like a post office box shelf. You're getting up here in there. And they got everybody in these boxes, and they have dividers in there, so whatever size you are, they can make it smaller. And so he's in there, and they opened up to his box, and he'd turned completely around and was facing out.
Really?
Because they had it as small as they could make it, and
And he was still.
He was a wrestler like me, so he was limber enough and contortionist enough that he could turn himself around in there and come back out the other way.
Did he give him a surprise?
Yeah.
Just jump on him.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, we had to go through that training, and out in the, you spent like 3 days by yourself out in the field navigating. You had to go from point A to point B.
Yes.
And one of the funny things was those pararescuemen, so we were already kind of experienced doing this kind of stuff. They would assign some officer with us.
Okay.
Because they have to go through the
keep
pilots
to
and
keep
stuff.
an eye on you.
For us to keep an eye on them.
Oh.
To help them get through.
Oh.
Because these are officers that might have just come right out of the Air Force Academy or something.
So they're like proper weapons.
Yeah, and I think I had a major or something with me. They don't send you to unless you're going to get sent over to Vietnam or something, and then they send you to survival school. Okay, so some of these guys had been in the Air Force for quite a while, but now they're going to go over to Southeast Asia, so now they got to go to survival school. So now you got this officer who may be somebody who flies a desk and might be a pilot or something, but your job is to make sure he makes it through survival school. So we would mess with him and do things like go out and, because we did this during training, you got to learn to survive on what you have there, and that means eating bugs when you have to eat bugs.
Yeah.
So we'd be out there, collecting bugs, and they would give you this pemmican bar. It was out of the survival rations in an airplane and whatnot. There's pemmican bar is ground beef, dried ground beef, put together with lard. So it's like 90% lard.
Yeah.
And 10% ground beef in there.
It's like pure survival.
Yeah, it's pure survival, just energy food, but it's tasted terrible. Okay. Except it wasn't as bad as to eating bugs, But so I go out and collect some bugs and chop the bugs all up and put them in our little mess kit fry pan, make a fire and cook it over the fire there. And the pemmican had all that lard in it, so you put a little of that in there for grease, And then, the officers there looking at us like we're crazy because we're going to eat bugs. He'd rather just eat the pemmican bar. And he said, oh, no, this is great, And then sir, you want some of this? No, and they're turning their nose up at it, you know, and when he's not looking, you throw the bugs out, throw a bunch of pemmican in there and finish cooking it up. Then you sit there in front of him eating it and gross him out thinking you're eating the bugs. Which I would have anyway, but it was like...
Yeah, when you need to.
When I need to, you know.
Brilliant.
But anyway, so that was it. Survival school, Fairchild Air Force Base. And then from there, I spent a year at Fairchild in Spokane. And then I got an assignment to go to Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Was my next assignment. You know, and you don't have a choice when the Air Force says, all of a sudden they come in and says, here, you got some orders. Oh, I was liking it here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when you're stateside, if there's not a war going on, they'll keep you at a base for 4 years.
And what? There wasn't a war going on at that point?
There was.
There
Vietnam
was
going on.
Vietnam.
So, but we had basically pulled all the troops out of Vietnam, and we were just in Thailand. So what was going on in Thailand is that we were still sending spy drones
Yes.
over Hanoi, and like they still had our POWs. Okay, and so but we'd pulled most of the troops out except for what was guarding the Pentagon, or not the Pentagon, but the
Embassy.
You know, you always had the Marines and the embassy staff and stuff there in Saigon. And so, and we were still sending spy drones flying over. So I was on at NKP, which was Non-Com Phanom is the name of it, which is the town right across the Mekong River from Vietnam, North Vietnam, where Ho Chi Minh was born in Non-Com Phanom. So it's kind of a interesting situation. Non-Com Phanom would have a Ho Chi Minh Day.
Okay.
And we were right across the river, which is real close to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and where all the activities going on.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, people would the North Vietnamese guys would shoot at us if they saw us out in the open, out across the river. You know. It's a long way. It was a long ways, but just for harassment, probably they'd shoot some bullets over our way.
Yeah.
This is in Thailand, so a lot of the bases in Thailand is where the Air Force was. We'd already pulled out of all the Air Force bases out of Vietnam.
Yeah.
They're in Thailand, and now we're in process of shutting down the bases in Thailand. And we would stand on. We had alert crews. We were on alert, so we weren't supposed to be flying anybody into Vietnam, but we were.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
basically spy planes and stuff. So we were on alert just in case somebody got shot down. We might have to go in.
Okay.
Okay. So two of the bases were Udorn and Udon. There was NKP, Udorn up by Laos up here, Udon down here by the south end of North Vietnam, and we would go down and pull alert duty at these bases. And at one time or another, these bases were all R&R centers, you know, so when people, you know, Army guys and stuff from Vietnam got a day off or a week off for R&R, they'd send them over to Thailand.
Okay.
You know, so there was a lot of activity around these bases. You know? So anyway, I was at Non-Com Phanom. Then we closed Non-Com Phanom and moved down to central Thailand, which was Karat.
Okay.
And while we were at Karat is when, and then from Karat, they decided that they were going to close the embassy. Forget which one they did first. I think it was Saigon. They closed the embassy and pull everybody out of Saigon. Yeah, Saigon. And so we had to fly in there and evacuate the Marines and the embassy staff.
Okay.
Okay. So
that was the mission.
That was the mission, just going in there and evacuating the staff.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's a whole story in itself. I mean, what happened there. I was just kind of new to here, so I was on a backup crew. I didn't actually get to fly into Saigon. I was on the backup crew.
Yeah.
And everything went pretty smooth on our end. But there was a lot of issues where, you know, South Vietnamese pilots were grabbing airplanes and flying them out the aircraft carriers offshore and landing them there and with their family and everything, and then they were pushing the helicopters over the side, you know, because they didn't have room for all these helicopters that they couldn't, put on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And had incidents where planes were crashed because too many people piled on the plane and brought it down because there's too much weight. You know?
When it's trying to take off.
Well, yeah, or it's on top of a building and people are getting on board the helicopter and too many people got on board and
Wow.
couldn't take off. And none of ours happened. That these were the planes that had been given to the South Vietnamese Army and stuff, and they were trying to get out with their friends and family and stuff. And just too many people got them, and then killed the whole family, kind of thing.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and then we did the same thing for evacuation of, like a month later, for evacuation of Phnom Penh in Cambodia.
Okay.
So
another evacuation.
Because the Khmer Rouge communists were taking over Cambodia and killing all the Cambodians. And so that was another evacuation. So we did those 2 evacuations. So then everything's kind of calmed down and everything, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get to relax the rest of my 6 months here, and let's, sign up for some college classes and whatnot. And then right after that, the Cambodians took one of our merchant ships, the Mayaguez. And so then we got tasked with going down. And actually, I take this all back. I got to back up. This was all before we left in Non Com Phnom up north.
Okay.
So we're doing everything, staging it down here. So the base was down on the Gulf of Thailand was Utapao. So we had another base down here. And so we all had to stage down at Utapao because we were going to go out and rescue the... And you have to understand, this was 75.
Okay.
And 75 or late 74. Anyway, I forget. Anyway, there hasn't been any war going on, so to speak. We didn't have anybody in Vietnam since 73. Okay.
So it's been a while.
It's been a while, two or 3 years. Okay. And you have to understand that where the military operates is promotions are based on your combat ribbons. And if you're not going into combat, and you got all these people from the Vietnam era who got combat ribbons, and you don't have any because you just got out of the academy or whatnot, or you don't have any ribbons, so you're not going to get promoted before everybody else because you're in the tail end of things because they get priority over you because they get points for each combat ribbon. You get certain points depending on what level of ribbon you got.
So you were at the back of the queue at this
Well,
point.
everybody was.
Okay.
Everybody's at the back of the queue as far as, during Vietnam, there was pararescuemen that they did blankets. Everybody who's E5 is now an E6. And everybody's an E6 now an E7. They just did blanket. 3 times they did that in Vietnam. Where guys promoted real quick because they just, basically it's like you're outliving the people above you.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
So they promoted you up. We need more supervisors because those guys died, kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Or they got out. They said, I'm not doing this any longer. I'm going to retire. Get out of the military. So anyway, what happened? We're down at Utapao, and we went down, staged down there. The day we were going down there was a helicopter. There's 2 helicopter squadrons. There was a rescue helicopter squadron and a special ops helicopter squadron. The rescue helicopters were designed to go in and rescue 1 or 2 pilots. And we had heavy armor plating on the helicopters, and we had extra guns on the helicopters. We had smaller fuel tanks because they had fire suppression foam in them, and we had air refueling capabilities. The special ops helicopters, they were made for carrying a whole bunch of Marines and equipment someplace and dropping them off. And we had hoist capabilities. So this special ops helicopters had none of that. They had big fuel tanks with no fire suppression foam in it. They only had two miniguns and not 3. And they didn't have any armor plating. And so they were transported. They had one of their helicopters had 19 security police forces. So security police were trained to go in and do rescues like this too.
Okay.
So they had 19 of those guys they were bringing down. If they'd have just let us go down that day, we would have rescued the crew off the ship with not much problem. But politics got in the way, and they wanted to get everybody involved. Everybody wanted their turn for some combat time.
Yeah.
So instead of going in that day, they delayed it 2 days.
Right.
And so that they could bring Marines from Okinawa and planes from the Philippines, and bring the Navy ships from the Philippines.
So it was like a gold rush where
It
everybody
was like a
wanted
gold
a
rush where
potential-
everybody wanted to be involved with this little war that was going to happen against the Cambodians. Instead of just going back there and getting the crew of the ship. Okay, so they delayed their planning and everything. In the meantime, they had taken the crew to this island that supposedly Intel said only had 12 elderly fishermen on it, but really had probably 1,200 enemy troops that either was on it or they moved in there during this 2-day delay.
Yeah.
So it was basically a setup for a trap. And we had procedures that we would do as a rescue helicopter. You fly 2 helicopters together.
Okay.
And our procedure is you fly in, and the one helicopter goes and makes a low pass and see if he draws any fire. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And see if its coast is clear. And then the other helicopter come in, and then one helicopter stands off and the other helicopter goes in to do the rescue. Well, Special Ops, their procedures were you take 5 helicopters in there loaded with Marines and equipment, and you fly in there, land, and drop them off, and then get the hell out of there.
Okay.
Okay. So, with all the politics going on and everything, they decided not to have us go in there first, to have the Special Ops helicopters go in there with the Marines and, overwhelm them with numbers. And, well, they did that, and they shot down all 5 of the first helicopters.
So the 1,200 people who were surprised on this island shot down all of the helicopters that were coming in.
Yeah, because they had 50 cal and they had rocket launchers, and so they shot them all down. 2 of them they shot down right on the beach, and the others got hit with 50 cal so bad that they didn't have enough fuel to make it back to shore, so they had to be 2 of them ditched in the ocean, and 1 of them landed on the beach in mainland Cambodia, landed on a beach there.
Okay.
And then we had to go in there and rescue them off the beach.
So that's like a sudden moment of complete chaos.
It was a sudden moment of complete chaos. And then we came in as like the 3rd wave of helicopters coming in, and it's kind of like the Gulf of Thailand. You look out over it, there's thousands of islands. It's kind of like you're flying out there, and navigation wasn't as good as it is now. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of like, oh, I wonder which island is off in the distance, which island it is. And then you see the smoke from the burning helicopters coming. Oh, it must be that island, because that one's, something's burning
That
over
was
there.
on fire.
Yeah. So that's how we found the island, was or getting to the right island right away, because it was smoke. And then, so I think we had like 20 Marines or so on our helicopter, because we weren't supposed to have more than 24 people on our helicopter.
And this is one of these helicopters that's
The rescue helicopter.
more armored.
Yeah, because
all the stuff.
even
on
though
it.
it's the same size as the other helicopter, we already had armor weight and everything else on there. So
Yeah.
we could only take 24, and they could take like 45,
Okay.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was the weight limit that we were told. So that's why they went in there with their thing, because they could take more Marines. So we came in with our 24 Marines, and they had an alternate landing though. So the helicopters got shot down on this side of the island, and then we came around to this side to the alternate landing zone.
So just like opposite sides.
Opposite sides, and we didn't know. So we did what we normally did. One helicopter goes in, didn't take any fire, so he goes in and lands, and then he flies out and says that he took very little ground fire.
Yeah.
And then we came in behind him. Well, one of the problems is when they went in, they have their miniguns. They could blast away because there was no Marines on the island yet.
Yes.
They could just, blast as much as they wanted to blast.
Yeah.
when we came in behind them, they had already dropped their Marines off, and we didn't know exactly where they were.
So you didn't
we didn't
wanna
have
just-
pinned up, so we couldn't just blast away.
Yeah.
But they go in there, they said, well, we didn't take very much ground fire. Well, we went in there and dropped our Marines off, and then we flew out and we went back to the base, flew back together to the base. When we got back to the base, the other helicopter couldn't land because their landing gear wouldn't come down. They actually brought mattresses out of the barracks to put on the runway so they could land a helicopter softly onto the mattresses.
Wow.
Because they couldn't, their landing gear, because they were shot up so bad.
Yeah, yeah.
They got everything shot up underneath. When they dropped the Marines off, I guess they suppressed whatever, because we didn't take much.
But they didn't think that they got that much fire, but they did enough to like mess up the landing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we all went back to the base. We loaded up another load of Marines and headed back to the island again as ordered. And when we get there, they said, "Oh, stand by. We're not going to put those Marines in yet. We got the crew back." So during the process, and we got to watch this before we went in the first time.
Yeah.
Is they didn't know exactly where the crew was, but there was like gunboats leaving, and Cambodian gunboats leaving the island. So they assumed that they had the crew on one of those boats, and they didn't want the crew to get back to the.
Okay, this is the crew that you initially even went to rescue.
Meant to rescue.
Okay.
So we didn't know if they were on the ship or if they were on one of these gunboats.
Yes.
So they went in. When they went in there, the second time, they got another helicopter, put the security police guys that they should have put on the first time on the boat, and they got the boat secured. So the ship was secured, and now they said, okay, the crew's not on the ship. They must be on one of these gunboats. So they went in there and they're trying to figure out which, so they're gassing the boat. So finally they figured out which boat that the crew was on.
Okay.
And then, you ever heard of a Spectre gunship? So,
Explain, yeah.
Yeah, so in the old, they called it Puff the Magic Dragon in the old John Wayne Green Beret movie. But it's a C-130 that has a whole bank of miniguns on one side and a howitzer, 106 millimeter howitzer that shoots out the back.
So it's like a shell firing.
That even back in the 70s was computer operated and could hit a moving gunboat going across the water at 10 miles,
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
So they were basically blowing these little gunboats out of the water,
Yeah. But so it's like, did you sing there's not crew on this boat?
There's not crew on the boat, so once they knew there wasn't crew on the boat, they just started
Neutralize it.
neutralizing all these little gunboats.
And how many? I think you told me before these gunships. Like,
Well, gunships,
how many
they-
bullets it shoots a second or something?
Yeah, well, they shoot. The miniguns at the time shoot 4,000 rounds a second.
One minigun.
One minigun. So
Okay.
they had like a dozen of them on each side of the plane, and when they're flying around, they'll fly around in a circle, shooting with the miniguns. And it's all computerized. If they know that you're right there, they got you pinpointed by your radio signal. They can shoot this far away from you and not hit you.
Like 3 yards away.
Yeah, like a meter.
Yeah.
And so they call it a sterilization. If they got you pinpointed and they know exactly where they are, they'll come in and sterilize everything around you. So they knew where our crews had been shot down. They were on the beaches there. They had them pinpointed. They had the Marines pinpointed where they are. So these Spectre gunships come in. Well, normally you just need one,
Yeah.
Well, they sent 12 from the Philippines. They flew up there. It's kind of like, can we do this? So anyway, they sent a helicopter in to look for anybody on the helicopter that was down out in the water.
The ones that had been shot down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that helicopter got shot up real bad.
The one that was sent another
And
rescue.
in the helicopter, yeah.
Okay.
So we were there, and they asked us they were going to drop gas on them because the air crew in there had gas masks.
Oh, gas like
CS gas.
Oh, it's CS gas. Okay.
Yeah.
To just like neutralize everything.
Yeah, so
like
they were going
knock
to try to
them out.
neutralize them with gas because they figured the Cambodians didn't have gas masks and we did.
Okay.
So they thought, we'll gas them and then we can go in and pick up our people.
Mm-hmm.
So the Navy, we were timing it where we were flying in right above the wave tops, coming in low. As the Navy 2 or 3 Navy jets came in like this with the gas.
Just like, were they also low?
Yeah, they came in low just to cover them with gas.
So just dropped.
Well, they dropped the gas, but they didn't take into account which direction the wind was blowing, and they didn't get their targets. It all blew offshore, and as we came through, we went through the gas, and then we were in the clear. And as the pilot turned, he probably should have just kept going out, but he turned to make a land, to see if he can make a landing to pick up the crew.
Yeah.
And just as he made the turn and was coming into a hover, we were getting shot up. And of course, when you're in a helicopter, you got the helicopter noise, and you got your headphones on and everything. You don't hear gunshots. You hear like popcorn, bullets going through the, aluminum skin of the airplane.
The fuselage.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's not even that dramatic a noise.
It's not that.
So much
there's no dramatic
protection.
noise because the helicopter's so noisy to begin with, and then you got ear protection. You got earplugs in. You got headphones. You got a helmet on. You can't hear anything.
Yeah.
So, I was up on the left gun, which wasn't working, because these guns had a tendency to like jam and whatnot. And after the first couple runs in, we ended up with one gun in the back that was working, and the one on the right was working. My gun wasn't working.
You drew the short straw on.
Yeah, we kept rotating around.
Okay.
So it was my turn to be in the left gun, and so the guy who was in the back.
Yeah.
Just as the pilot made the turn, we took a round through one of the main fuel lines to one of the engines, and it just kind of cut the fuel line so that it was like a sprinkler spraying JP4 into the cabin.
Wow.
Okay. And then of course the pilots opened up all, they have their smoke and fume elimination procedures, which means open all the windows in the front, let everything blow out the back, which is where we were.
Okay.
So the guy that was in the tail, I was in front of the gas, and then my partner was in front of the gas, but the guy in the tail gun, he wasn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he fell down, and
was he okay with the fire that came in and hit that line?
Yeah.
He
didn't get hit, but
okay.
he fell down. He got hit by something. He got hit by a piece of shrapnel or something, because he fell down and he was acting like he was shot.
Okay.
Okay. He was flopping around, and really what happened, he got stung by a piece of shrapnel in his back. Thought he was shot, but it wasn't anything serious. But then he was I went back to help him because he was back in the gas, and I needed to get him forward. And and he was a big guy, and I'm pretty small still. And I'm trying to pull him forward, and he was fighting me and trying to pull back. And the reason being is because he had his comm cord clipped onto the minigun, and when he fell back, it came disconnected, and he's trying to plug back in so he could tell the pilot that we got hit.
Okay.
It was kind of like, we already know that. Just get up.
Yeah.
I finally got him coaxed up to the front, and just as I got him pushed into the window, I passed out from breathing too much jet fuel fumes.
Okay. So he was maybe delirious already.
He was already delirious, yeah.
And
we got him pushed in where he could, but the two of them were up getting some air, and I'm
back in the fumes.
I sat down on the ground right below the step into the cockpit, and I'm looking up at them, and they got their face out the window, so they're like getting blown like this.
Like, yeah, like because like dog in the like,
yeah,
smushy,
exactly. So their
place.
face like this. So I'm like thinking they're making fun of me and laughing at me because they're making faces at me, and I'm sitting down there kind of hallucinating, just thinking everything kind of went into slow motion, and then I got thinking, I says, oh, we just all died, and this is what it's like. There's like an inch or two of fuel sloshing around on the floor of the helicopter. Well, finally they look down and see that I'm kind of out of it, and they grab me and push me up into the window too. And then about 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I'm still alive. Okay.
Did they see you laughing as well?
Well, yeah, because they want to know what I was laughing at. I was laughing at them.
So they're like rescuing you, and you're just like...
They were teasing me years after that. It says, yeah, here's a guy who almost died, and he's sitting there laughing about it. And but anyway, so they our procedures would be, we had parachutes with us, and we were wearing them.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we wear the parachute, because there's that much more folded nylon that can stop a bullet if you get shot from behind.
It's like an extra barrier.
It's an extra barrier covering your whole backside. So we wore our parachutes when we were going in. A lot of guys would sit on their parachutes because bullets can come up through the bottom of the plane.
Yeah, and that's probably more commonplace for it to come up.
Yeah, right.
And
that's happened, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we they got me sobered up, and then it was like, okay, we're going to jump out. We're barely gaining altitude because we only has one engine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And
of the fuel.
We're an Air Force plane. Our pilots had never trained and never landed on an aircraft carrier before. So we're figuring we're going to get up enough altitude, 500 to 1,000 feet, where we can jump out and pop our parachutes.
Okay.
Okay. And because this thing's about to blow up at any second, because there's like bare wires hanging down and there's like fuel.
Yeah. Not a good recipe.
Not a good recipe. So we thought we were going to bail out, so we're getting ready to bail out. And then the pilot says, oh, there's an aircraft carrier. They tell us 70 miles away. We're going to go try to make a landing on the aircraft carrier. And he's never done it before. So they do practice procedures because he's only got one engine, so he can't hover.
Yeah.
Too much weight.
So it's like...
You got to do a running landing. So they train doing running landing. You lose an engine back at the air base, and you got to come in with one engine. You do a running landing. Well, they use 800 feet of runway for a running landing. That's what they train at.
Okay, 800 feet.
800 feet.
So that's about 275 meters or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the aircraft carrier has 400 feet of deck.
Okay.
Runway.
Yeah.
That's their longest runway, is 400 feet.
Yeah.
So he's got to do a running landing in half the distance that he normally does. Now the difference is, though, is the aircraft carrier can turn into the wind and go full speed ahead.
Yes.
So that's what he does.
Okay.
So he goes into the wind doing full speed ahead, and of course we're coming and landing into the wind.
Which slows you down faster.
It slows us down farther. So he was able to make a landing, and he used 200 feet of the runway. He landed in the middle of the runway there.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we're all like happy. We're on the aircraft carrier. We're alive. We even have somebody take a picture of us, like, hey, we survived. We're all done. We're all done with this war. We can get out of here. We can go home. Well, in the meantime, the flight engineer is looking at the plane, and he goes, hey, pilot, says, the only thing wrong with this thing is that fuel line is cut with a bullet.
Yeah.
He says, I can take a hacksaw and cut that out. If the Navy here has a hose that we could clamp on there, we could probably fly it off of here. And they try that, and the aircraft carrier commander comes down and says, because he had those same jets that were flying in that dropped the gas.
Yeah.
He says, they're running out of fuel. They got to land.
Yeah.
They need this runway you're sitting in the middle of. The Navy helicopters, the blades fold up, and they can move them off to the side and put them down below or whatever.
Yeah.
Ours don't. They're Air Force. So we didn't have folding blades. So he says, we're going to have to shove you over the side, which they'd done just a month earlier on the Saigon one.
Literally just push the helicopter off the side.
We're going to push you over, roll it off
sink.
the side and throw it in the ocean unless you can get it off here in the next 15 minutes. So they got it fired up, and we can fly back. So we, next thing we know, you charge it up, it's holding, looks like we can fly. We take off, and the pilot's on the radio going, what's our heading back to the island? We got told to go back to the island and start taking Marines off.
So the pilot's the first one to hear this news of the new, mission.
He's the one that volunteered to do it.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
And he did it before talking to you guys.
Yeah, he just made that decision. We're going back, and we're going to finish because our plane's fine now. The only major damage was that fuel line, which we fixed, so we can go back and start pulling Marines off.
I bet, did that make him popular at that moment?
Well, no, we weren't real happy about that, but hey, that's what we're there for. So it was only briefly, you know.
Yeah.
So we headed back to the island, and by now they go, okay, we're going to sterilize the island. So 12 of these Spectre gunships came over.
Okay, so we're back to the Spectre gunships.
Well, now we're back to where I got ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So now we're back to the Spectre gunships. So 12, we get back there and we're flying around 10,000 feet. We're like watching these Spectre gunships fly. 12 of them I counted in a circle, and they're like, they literally, when they're sterilizing an area, they'll put a bullet in every 6 inches square.
That's terrifying.
You got to be smaller than 6 inches to survive not getting hit. Okay.
Wow.
So anyway, that's what they were doing. Well, in the meantime, while they're doing that, the Klongbird shows up.
What's that?
So the Klongbird, that was their code name, is Klong.
Okay.
They were just a cargo C-130 plane that happened to have a daisy cutter. The daisy cutter is the largest non-nuclear bomb that the military has. Okay, and it was designed to clear landing zones for helicopters. So it explodes above the surface.
Yes.
And cleans out, denudes the vegetation for a mile circle.
A mile.
A mile.
So if it's like a forest or something, they drop it.
They drop it there, and then all
It's
these.
just gone.
And that's what they should have done to begin with, and then all the SOS, the special ops helicopters. They could have done their thing.
Yeah.
They could have kind of done their thing, and that would have been, because that's what they're used to doing. That was their procedures. They just missed the bomb part.
But there was also the risk of people being on.
There's people on the island, so
like people that needed to be rescued.
so it was kind of like they're asking, where can we drop the daisy cutter? And they're going, you're listening to because there's a command plane flying, the way up there, 30,000 feet is the commanders in the AWACS plane.
Okay.
So they're, talking to everybody, and there's we don't need that now. Oh, and they're like begging, oh, can we drop it someplace? It's like we don't want to take this back with us because everybody wanted to get in on the game. Okay. So if you were to draw a picture of the island, look at the picture of the island from the air.
Yeah.
You ever seen a biology book, a picture of a nerve cell?
Yeah. Okay,
so it's like a big round part of the island here with jagged peninsulas off. It kind of looked like a nerve cell.
Yeah.
And then a long peninsula down here, like about 3 miles over here, was another little island.
Yes.
So that's what it looked like. And there was so they told them, well, there's nobody down here that we know of, so drop it down there in that little island on the end of the peninsula. So they dropped this. So when the initial helicopters got shot down, some of them got shot down out on the water.
Yes.
And the ship came in there and rescued the guys out of the water.
Okay.
The ones that didn't drown.
So they were.
So they're sitting on it was a destroyer. There was a destroyer. The USS Holt.
Yeah.
Was there. The destroyer was there, and they sat off of they were like a mile offshore or more. They're about a mile offshore, and the air crew that was in there was calling out positions of the bad guys, and they were firing their cannon into shore trying to take out the bad guys from the ship.
Yeah.
And then so the crew members that they rescued out of the water, they were sitting on the deck of the ship in lounge chairs drinking lemonade, they said, and iced tea, and they dropped this daisy cutter over here, which would have been about 3, maybe 4 miles from them, and we're up here watching it.
Yeah.
This thing comes up like in a mushroom cloud, like you see the old pictures of the nuclear weapon mushroom clouds.
Yeah.
Just a smaller version of that, but it's like this big mushroom cloud, and then you see this big shock wave going out from there. And those guys sitting on the ship said it just blew them over backwards in their chairs, in their lounge chairs.
Really?
Just a shock wave from 4 miles away of this thing. That's how powerful this bomb is.
Spilled their iced tea.
Yeah, spilled everything.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, after that, everything was pretty calm. So that's when they told us to go back in and pick up the Marines.
But there were some Marines still on the beach 3 miles away from there.
Oh yeah,
So
no,
even
there
like,
were still
or like, even closer
Yeah,
than the
so
guys
you
that
have
got
to
blown
realize-
off their deck chairs.
Yeah, so the Marines that were still on the island were in a major panic because they didn't know what was going on.
Yeah,
You know,
you've got
and
those
just-
gunships and
just-
then a giant explosion.
You dropped a giant bomb, not, right by them, and the gunships blasting around them, and everything kind of quieted down. But these guys, and you got to understand, most of these Marines were green right out of basic training,
Okay.
right out of Marine infantry training. They came from Okinawa. They were, they might have one sergeant who was their leader that has a little bit of experience, but hardly none of them had any combat experience. They were all freaked out. So we, in fact, so after they did all that, one of the things I first time before I told you we went in and we dropped Marines in there twice.
Yeah.
So the second time we dropped Marines in, it was kind of a delay. They said, don't drop the Marines in. So we were flying around. I kind of forgot this part, but we were flying around out there making circles, waiting for them to give us orders. Take the Marines back to the base, put them on the island.
Yeah.
So it was about an hour we were doing that. And it was like, they first told us we're going back home. So we told the Marines that, hey, they're not going to put you in, we're going back. Then they said, stand by, don't go home yet. So forgot to tell the Marines this. We told them that they're going home, but we didn't tell them, they told us to stand by now. So the Marines were all kind of fell asleep on the boat, on the aircraft, or on the helicopter.
Yeah.
So they fell asleep, and they're laying there, and then all of a sudden they go, put the Marines in. And the pilot immediately started making his run in. Well, we're not ready either back, so we're getting all our stuff, getting the guns ready and everything, getting ready to go in, and then it was like we forgot to wake the Marines up. So it was like just as we go to land on the island, it was like, oh, we forgot to wake the Marines up. So we're waking these poor guys' kids up, poor guys up, and they don't know where we are. They didn't know.
They think they're going home.
They thought they were going home last they saw us. So we're like shuffling them off the thing, and they're like leaving their packs and their guns, and it's like we're throwing all their stuff off to them because we're going to get out of there before we get shot up.
Yeah.
So we dumped them off in a stupor on the island.
Yeah.
And anyway,
So they've gone through this whole thing now, like the gunships have been blasting. The
No,
Daisy
this was
cutter.
before the blast.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you that's the point where you get shot.
Yeah,
you're
then
losing
after that,
fuel and you
right.
go around. But what I mean is like that's all their
They got off in a
experiences.
stupor, and then they
got off, and then all hell breaks
loose while they're there.
And
yeah.
So, okay. So now it's quieting down, but they've just gone through that whole thing. An enormous bomb has gone off on the island next to them.
Yeah.
And the gunships have been going off like crazy. They're in.
Yeah.
Like this is not something a rookie would be used to.
No, this is not what I signed up for. Yeah.
So you. So now you're flying back in to try and pick them up again, right?
So now it's like, okay, after the gunships gets done, now it's getting close to dark, and now it's like, okay, go in and pick them up. Okay, so we're still on this other side of the island, and we go in to pick them up, and it's kind of a steep beach. You can't land. You have to like hover with the back of the helicopter ramp on the sand.
Just like touching.
That's touching, but the wheels in the front of the helicopter are still flying up in the air.
Okay.
So they turn and they land just like that. And we get there and it's dark now, okay?
Yeah.
And I could see lights from the other helicopter further down the beach. So we came in like together like this, and we were like, he went first and then we came in. And I could see that helicopter down the beach, and there's not many people, and I'm rotated around. I'm on the tail gun now.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things we did back there is we have a cargo strap against the back opening, and when you're loading people or something, you remove the cargo strap, or you just leave it up and people come in and duck under it.
Yeah.
It's about chest high.
Okay.
And
it's just so that if no one falls out or whatever.
Yeah, I just don't know if he falls down. It was also to slow people down from not too many people coming on at one time.
Okay.
So
You don't want that because otherwise it's like too heavy.
yeah.
Like you said.
So what happened was I'm looking down and I'm looking at the other helicopter. I'm not seeing anybody coming, you know. And finally, this guy comes running out of the dark, full speed sprint for the helicopter. And of course, the pilot's all worried about him because the ramp's like right here. Well, the tail rotor's right here.
Wow.
And these guys are panicked and they come in. He's worried about somebody's going to just run right into the tail rotor. They're supposed to come from this way.
And they're coming in the wrong side.
Well, no. Well, this guy came in. No, they're coming in this way. But he came in, and he hit that cargo strap with his chest, and it just laid him out. I get him up, get him in. It's like I felt sorry about it. I took the cargo strap down, and then guys are coming from down the beach. There's 1, 2, you know, and the pilot's telling me to count them off.
Yeah.
Because we could only take like 20.
Okay.
And 24 at the max. So I'm counting off like that, and then all of a sudden I didn't realize this other helicopter took off. Well, there was like 100 Marines that were in a dead panic, and they all came running at our helicopter, and they like all hit us at once, trying to get in that back ramp, and I'm screaming at the pilot to take off.
Yeah.
I said, take off, and he's asking, is the tail rotor clear? I said, just take off. I said, we're getting too many, take off. And he remembers what happened in Saigon also.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm yelling at him to take off. And so he starts pulling away, and we were supposed to pick the Marines up, fly them over the aircraft carrier, hover on they have a helipad on the destroyer.
Yes.
But it wasn't stressed for our big helicopters.
Okay.
We could lightly touch down there, and then the Marines were going to get off.
Just jump
that
out.
was the procedure we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
So we get all these Marines are coming on board, and I'm yelling at him to take off, and finally he takes off, and then he realizes that we're overweight and overgrossed, and he's over torquing the engines to not crash in the ocean and get us airborne. We're barely climbing.
Okay.
And he's asking me for a head count. Well, I'm back there. I was actually shoving people off the plane.
People are like hanging on.
They're hanging on, and I'm like pulling their fingers and shoving them off the plane, you know, knowing what had happened.
Yeah, you just got to get them off.
I have to get them off
before they get too high.
before they get too high. Some of them dropped on the beach, some of them dropped in the water, but they weren't. It wasn't deep out there. They'd be okay. So
yeah,
I got them off where we can, and then when we got too high, I started pulling people in, and then we started grabbing all their equipment and throwing it off. Their guns, their helmets, everything, anything that weighed anything, you know.
Yeah.
Give me your flak jacket, everything was getting thrown off the plane. And the pilots, and they were in there, I mean, they had dove in there. They're like stacked on top of each other like this.
Like sardines.
Like sardines, like cordwood. So the pilot's asking for a head count, you know. He says, I think we got too many. I says, no shit. You know, it's like, I says, yes, we do. It says like, he says, give me a head count. I said, when we get them stood up where we can count heads and we can see all their heads, we'll get you a head count. So we got everybody up and we counted. We ended up with 54 Marines. Well, we already had 6 crew members. So we had 60 people where they told us don't have more than 25, 24.
Wow.
So we ended up with 54 Marines and got them sucked up. And then it's like, well, we can't hover on the aircraft or on the destroyer.
You don't have the power anymore.
We got to do another rolling landing onto the aircraft carrier.
So you have both engines, but now there's so much weight.
Now there's so much weight. It's the same as having only one engine. And he's got to do it at night. Not only has never landed on an aircraft carrier except once before with one engine. Now he's got to do it at night. He's never done it at night. So we went there and successfully landed at night and dropped everybody off. And
so did he land it perfectly again?
He landed perfectly in the middle of the runway again and did fine there.
Great.
And then we went back for more Marines, and by then other helicopters come in there, and I think we only got like 18 or so, or only got a few Marines, and then we dropped them off at the aircraft on the destroyer like we were supposed to the first time.
Yes, yeah.
And then there we were done, and They said everybody was off, and we went back to base. As it turned out, everybody, of course, was wanting to tell their story, but for 30 years it was classified. We couldn't say a word because everything had gone to shit, and a lot of people died, and the story that would really happen was not what they told the news media. And
until 20 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, until 30 years was up, then they, freedom of information allowed them. And plus they went back there looking for it because turned out we left 2 Marines on the island.
Oh no.
They were told to go out and guard the perimeter for the evacuation, and nobody went and told them to come in. So they ended up getting taken prisoner and killed in Cambodia sometime later.
Ugh.
So there was a whole story on TV about that. There was about over 50 to 60 that actually perished, U.S. soldiers that perished there. Most of them on those first 5 helicopters.
Yeah, it's hectic.
Yeah. And a lot of them, most of them drowned because, 1, they couldn't swim, and 2, they couldn't swim with all the crap they were wearing.
Loads of gear.
I mean, the Air Force guys, some of the Air Force guys got accommodations for saving, one guy saved 6 Marines that hung on to him while he was floating in his life preserver.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a wild story.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So that's my one combat experience. But
and then I'm guessing that got you some ribbons.
That got me ribbons and got me points and got me promoted to E9, Chief Master Sergeant, in less than 16 years, which is usually you got to be a lifer for 30 years. Usually you get promoted to E9 around 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was in a career field that was just a matter of surviving those above me. Most people did. That was kind of my claim to fame, as I made it all the way through my career for 21 years without a major injury that took me out. Most guys went out with, back injuries or just died in plane crashes or, so.
Longer than 15 minutes.
Yeah, and then I was in the Air National Guard, so the Air National Guard's a little bit different than the Air Force. In the active Air Force, you're competing for positions nationwide or worldwide. So
the International Guard, just
Air National Guard.
The International Guard, yeah.
Air.
Oh, Air National Guard.
So there's the National Guard in the U.S. The National Guard is the Army.
Yes.
And then the Air Force calls themselves the Air National Guard. That's the reserve component of the Air Force, is the Air National Guard.
And is that anything to do? Forgive me if I don't know, but is that anything to do with you are at home but just working another job but on standby in case they need you?
So right. So you're a part-timer, although half the positions we had in our unit were full-time. So I worked Air National Guard full-time with the same green card that I had in active duty. Okay, so.
But I have to ask though, because I feel like we've jumped into the Air National Guard. So maybe you kind of already covered this, but so you were in the rescue kind of, in the military beforehand. How long were you in after that?
On active duty, I was in for 4 years. So when I got done with Thailand, I had 1 year left.
And
the first year was training.
The events that happened, that crazy situation that you were in, where you managed to thankfully rescue a bunch of people. How long from the end of your kind of section was that? Was that near the kind of end? But you got promoted after that, right? So did you stay in that position for much longer afterwards? You said for 20 years.
Yeah, I went to the Air National Guard after 4 years.
Okay.
So I went from Thailand to McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento for a year.
Yes.
And then at the time, I was mulling over staying on. I really liked what I was doing in the Air Force.
Yeah.
But I had this goal from the age of 5 of being a game warden. And the only reason I went in the Air Force was to get 2 years of college and get also, I was going to get out and go back home to California. Mm-hmm. The nearest reserve unit was either in Portland, Oregon or Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. or it's Tucson or Portland,
Yeah.
and
Very different climates.
very different climates. But then I heard, they're creating a pararescue Air National Guard unit here in California. Oh, really? Where? Down in Hayward, in the Bay Area. Oh, really? And I was really very close to just re-enlisting and staying on 20 years active duty.
Yeah.
And forgetting about game warden.
Okay.
At least temporarily. And but they created this Air National Guard unit, and I go, I can go there, and I can go to college. I collect a GI Bill. They were paying pretty good with the GI Bill. So I signed up for the Air National Guard as one of the charter members of the 129th ARS, Air Rescue Service, and at the time it was called ARRS, Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service, because we got a lot of money from NASA to be available to rescue any
Stuff that went wrong.
astronauts.
Yeah, I can't imagine anything going on with astronauts
Well-
where people survive.
Well, no, but a lot of it, I don't know if you're probably not old enough,
Because of
but
the training.
when I was a kid, we were watching the space launches.
Yeah.
And when you watch the space launches, they'd have a film of the blast off.
Mhm.
And you'd have a film of the first stage breaking away and the second stage breaking away.
Like a camera on the actual ship.
There was a camera on the ship.
Yeah,
it was
I remember. I've seen that footage.
because they weren't broadcasting. They weren't able at the time to broadcast that like they do now.
Not live.
Not live. Somebody had to go pick up the film
You had to
canisters.
find the film.
Well, guess who they had to go pick up the film canisters? They had us, the pararescuemen, go pick up the film canisters. So when the plane, or when the rocket blasts off from Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, whatever,
Yeah.
the C-130 was already airborne up there with a bunch of PJs in the back.
What's a PJ?
Pararescuemen. That's what.
That's you, PJs,
So on the
okay.
Air Force, when you're air crew member, they gave everybody a 2-year designation. So when they fill out the form, it's just pilot is PL or
Yeah.
And so
It's a parajumper.
we were parajumpers. That later on
Yes.
they changed it to RS, rescue specialist, but everybody still calls each other PJs.
Okay.
Okay, so they had like 8 PJs on the plane, and then when the first stage broke away, when it breaks away, it ejects that canister, and that canister's got a beeper on it. And the C-130 had a special tracker. You could always see the rescue C-130s because they had a big dome over the pilot's head on the C-130. It was a radar tracker dome, and they could track beepers coming down. So like when the parachute opens on the space capsule, when they come re-entry, they got a beeper on there, and they could find them and track them down. So they always had PJs there to get the hell. So the normal thing was the capsule was supposed to land next to an aircraft carrier. Okay.
It was like they'd figured out where
They figured out where
it was
it's supposed to land. Well, a couple times it didn't do that. So the first time it didn't do that, they lost. In fact, if you ever watch that movie, The Right Stuff, they
No, I
showed.
haven't seen it.
Watch that movie, The Right Stuff. They show that happen in there, where they lose a capsule and it sinks in like the Marianas Trench, where it's like 30,000 feet
Like
deep,
the deepest part of the
where
ocean.
no way of recovering it.
Yeah.
So they lost that capsule, and it was because they didn't land next to where the ship was. They landed hundreds of miles away,
Oh.
and they didn't have anybody to pick them up. And then the astronaut's in there, and he's like sweating to death because now there's nothing running. He's running out of air and sweating. So he pops the hatch, and the ocean was a little bit rough.
Yeah.
And a wave came in and sunk the thing, and then he's out floating, and they had to rescue him out of the water. But they lost all the data,
Yeah.
because they weren't broadcasting the data back. It was all
In that capsule.
in the capsule. I forgot who that was. It was Shepard or somebody like that. Anyway, watch that movie. Right Stuff is a good
Yeah.
movie. Anyway,
Okay.
so we would pick up those canisters. There'd be like 3 or 4 canisters, and they'd drop 2 PJs on each canister. And then we'd sit out there waiting for the helicopter to come pick us up. I never got to do that, but after the PJs did. So
Okay.
I got to do the training for doing that, but never actually got to go do it. So I wasn't stationed down in Florida. I never got down there. So anyway, I misremember the PJ's telling us, says, yeah, he says, we were sitting there, the beeper's going,
Yeah.
and we're sitting in our raft.
Oh, so they have a raft.
They have a raft. They jump
Okay.
up to the raft. They're sitting in the raft. There's 2 rafts. They each have an individual raft. So they're sitting in the rafts, and there's sharks all around the place. It's like, why are the sharks attracted to us just sitting here in these rafts? It's like, well, it turned out later on they found out it was the frequency of the beeper was attracting the sharks.
No way.
So later on they they had to put a switch on there so we could turn the beepers off.
Otherwise, it's just
And
ringing
then when
the
the
dinner bell.
when it was time for the helicopter to be in the area, we'd call them on the radio and vector them in, or turn the beeper on for a minute so they, before this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's too many sharks.
Otherwise, there's a problem.
There's a problem.
Wow. That's definitely not a nice thing to be the person who discovers that they're.
Yeah.
It's like turning on the dinner bell.
One of the funny stories was one of my colleagues found a dead shark on the beach.
Yeah.
So they took the shark and they clamped it to his butt through his wetsuit.
Yeah.
They took a picture and then sent it to headquarters. It says, you got to do something about this. The sharks are driving us out of the water.
Oh, I can imagine that went down very well.
Yeah.
So that wraps it up for this episode of The Wild Dispatch. Tune in next week and you'll hear the second and final part of the many stories involving Dennis having near misses and all kinds of shenanigans. If you're enjoying these stories and this podcast in general, then feel free to share it with someone or everyone you know. Until next time.